A calorie is a calorie, a carb is a carb. But Alan Aragon said, you guys kill me. So I see this stuff all the time from the IIFYM crowd. Uh, Alan Aragon didn't say that. I keep telling people, okay, did Alan Aragon say a carb is a carb? Yeah, there's a YouTube clip where he says a carb is a carb, and then you guys cut off and pretend like you didn't hear the rest of that whole clip where he clarified the statement and explains, glucose and fructose. And the same thing goes for a calorie is a calorie. Um, yep, a calorie is a calorie, and then you guys kind of just ignore the whole rest of the statement, and then you defend your diet of Pop-Tarts and whey protein as, well, Alan Aragon said. Well, yeah, that's great. You go ahead and just quote somebody, and then you completely misquote them. He didn't say that. In fact, I've talked to Alan multiple times. It's not like we're friends that I call him up, but on Facebook and stuff like that. That's not what he said at all. I mean, you guys keep twisting it into something else. Is a calorie a calorie? Yes and no. I mean, is a calorie a unit of heat, and are we measuring energy? Yes. And does that stay constant? Yes. But is a calorie of carbohydrate like a calorie of protein? No. No, the body does different things with them. Is a carb a carb? Yeah, sure. You could make the argument that, lactose and fructose and glucose are all carbohydrates, right? Because it's carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. And then you stop and you look at how it actually hacks, how it breaks down in the body, and how it metabolizes and how it functions, and suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, they're all different. Fructose is very different than glucose, and even sucrose is different because sucrose is fructose and glucose. So what happens there? And when you start digging deeper, you realize, okay, a carb is not a carb at all. I mean, they're all different. It's almost like we should start breaking things down. Instead of saying protein, fat, and carbs, we should be saying like amino acids, listing the individual amino acids, because leucine content in a food matters. And then we should say carbohydrate content, and then break it down by fructose, glucose, sucrose, lactose. And the fats, you go into, oh my gosh, caprylic acid, caproic acid, lauric acid, butyric acid. You could sit there and you could rack your mind around all the different omega-3s and omega-6s and omega-9s, and there's short chain fatty acids and your medium chain triglycerides, and long chains. And we could really go into the weeds forever. I mean, you could just keep digging and digging and digging, and it would never get down to a point where you could make it make sense on a food label. Okay? Can it make sense in a biochem textbook? Oh yeah, I have tons of biochem textbooks. If you guys want to sit down and read biochem textbooks, I'll sit here, I'll do audiobooks or something. I'll read you guys biochem. Is it useful? No. Not unless you're doing biochem research or you're planning on going to medical school. Is it useful for trying to figure out what to eat on your diet? No, I don't refer to my biochem textbooks ever. Believe me, I have a dozen of them. I can't think of the last time I went to a biochem textbook to look up something about my nutrition. So, is a calorie a calorie? Yes and no. Sorry. That's the honest answer. And is a carb a carb? Yes and no. And that's the honest answer. But it's like on the very, very tip of the iceberg here. A calorie is a calorie, and then it kind of like turns into this whole cascade. Like, well, when you eat fat, do you release insulin? How much insulin compared to when you eat carbs? How much insulin? When you eat protein, how much insulin? That's just choosing insulin. We didn't even dive into like glucagon, GLP-1, things like that. I mean, there's so many other things that are coming into play here, from leptin and ghrelin and orexin and all these things like that. That just boom, you've got this huge hormonal cascade from certain foods. So it's not as simple as just saying a calorie is a calorie. You can't say a protein is a protein, a carb is a carb, a fat is a fat, because omega-3 fats are very, very different from, say, MCTs. And even when it comes to protein, Lane Norton, if you guys actually take the time to read his thesis, it shows you that, soy protein and whey protein and wheat protein, and they are completely different. You can't just say, oh, I ate 20 grams of protein. It doesn't matter where it came from. It doesn't work that way. If you're not hitting that leucine threshold, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. You're still getting protein, but it doesn't do the same thing inside your body. It doesn't stimulate mTOR, it doesn't stimulate MPS to the same degree in the same way that hitting a leucine threshold does. So I'm going to call this one kind of a myth, but it's really just an oversimplification. People are just taking something that's very, very complex, and they're reductionist. They're just making it as super simple as they can, to such a point where they've made it so simple that it actually becomes kind of incorrect. I hope that makes sense.